My pet peeve is having availability but not buyability. And that translates into lower consumer confidence in your brand, whether that be your retail brand or the brand itself. And so how do you, to your point, dig into the right inventory node, essentially, to make sure that you've got the right inventory in the right place?
We have a very seasoned guest today in Mena Wooters. Very exciting podcast with her. She has a very interesting career and a very, very interesting view on AI, leadership, and all things e-com. So super excited for today's episode. Welcome to another episode of the e-commerce toolbox experts perspective. Joining us today, we have Mena Wouters. Welcome, Mena.
Thanks for having me, Kaylin. I appreciate it.
Awesome. We always like to start off with a brief introduction. So maybe talk to us a bit about your career journey. You have very, very interesting background that goes from retail to vendor side to SaaS products. So maybe talk to us a bit about that career journey.
Yeah, so my perspective is really grounded in operating e-commerce at scale. And so I started off really working D2C for really big brands like Xerox and Lexmark and scaling those across Europe. And then I moved over the years to positions at Lowe's and Electrolux, and then eventually advising global brands and mass retailers. And so that really has changed my perspective over the years on really what e-commerce is and how it should function and what sort of blocks e-commerce from being as successful as I think some of folks are hoping it will be, and then out of the gate really not performing the way that they had otherwise hoped. So I've got lots of thoughts on how to scale and how to scale effectively and how to de-block what's preventing you from getting the most out of your e-com.
Very cool. You have a ton of experience. Let's start off with an easy but a hard one. What's the biggest common mistake you see across retailers?
Well, I think it depends on which angle we look at it from, right? So if we're looking at it from the brand perspective and how brands partner with retailers and that trade relationship, or if we're looking at it from just the retailer perspective. But I think a common denominator is really ownership. Who is going to own accountability and revenue of your e-commerce engine? And I think that's really probably common across both retailers and brands.
Okay. Picking up on the retail side, how are you seeing NRF was just a couple of weeks ago? How are you seeing like AI being tactically used in the field? What's your opinion on that? I know it's a hot topic right now. I see it pretty split. CIOs are either leaning in or they have like AI fatigue and they're leaning out. So yeah, curious what you're seeing in the field and through some of your former colleagues and just as you're an expert in the field.
Yeah, listen, I think there's a lot of Davos just happened this past week. And I think if you listen to a lot of the commentary that came out of that, the hot topic was AI and how are companies using it to accelerate their business or create efficiencies in their processes. But the takeaway is that nobody really knows what to do with AI. They're all just sort of giving it a go. So I think a couple of things. I think AI can be fantastic in terms of allowing you to scale and allowing you to create content and experiences that you otherwise would have taken years and years and years, or at least months to build. But it's going to scale things ineffectively and somewhat in a dangerous place if your system is not in a good spot. So your foundations need to be in a really clean and healthy place. So is your inventory in a good spot? Is your availability in a good spot? Is your foundational content in a good spot? If you've got those things in place, I think you can scale with AI in ways like creating contextual commerce experiences, scaling your content and PDP in ways that you otherwise couldn't, but you're going to scale in the wrong way if those foundations are not in place.
Interesting. I was on with another retailer a couple days ago, and they were talking a bit about how there's like a conflict between optimizing product pages and how AI wants to actually consume product pages. And the example that they gave was that a lot of retailers for the last couple of years have been cutting their product description shorter because they don't want people scrolling on the web page because it drops conversion. But then on the other side of it, if you look at like the Universal Commerce Protocol, you need rich product data. So maybe talk to me a bit about where do you see some of the, like, as now these channels are emerging, like they're effectively new channels, like how is that going to change how people have to upload product data, images, things like that. Like, is there going to be almost this content that's built for machines but not for humans? Talk to me a bit about if you've given that some thought.
I have given it some thought. I mean, I'm learning too, right? I don't have all the answers. I think that we've got an interesting dynamic between things like SEO, AEO, GEO, and the shopping experience, and then what's happening on your owned channels. And so I think we could end up in a situation where PDPs are really just you're already down in the funnel and it's just a gut check to make sure that the information that you found through your other search resources are actually true, and you can say yes, that validates my purchase. I think we're going to have to think largely about what we want our PDP experience to be in that lower part of the funnel, rather than thinking that it's a discovery tool or even really a consideration tool. A lot of the consideration has been done in these other sort of platforms, other sorts of engines, and I think that's where we're going to have to find synergies. Do I have the answer to that yet? No. I think we're going to have to look at how we load product data and create product data for these AI engines. I think that SEO is probably further down the list of things to worry about at this point, but consistency, I think, is going to be key. So for the consumer, how can we make sure that we're drawing that silver thread essentially through all of those experiences and all those different channels that they might be looking for products? And then on the back end side of it, how are we optimizing for each individual channel from a business perspective?
If you're listening to the e-commerce toolbox, you're entitled to a podcast exclusive website audit. Go to noibu.com/podcast-audit for a free scan that uncovers the hidden friction blocking your conversions and shows you where you're leaking revenue.
What are some of the other areas that you think people might have underinvested in that might bite them back now on when it comes to agentic availability and basically prepping their website for being picked up through the search engines?
It's a great question. I think what folks have probably underestimated is the amount of content and the types of content that consumers need in order to feel confident in their purchase. And I think they thought, hey, I've got my PDP. It looks really healthy. It's got everything. It checks every box. It's got the product data, it's got the specifications, it's got video, it's got the spins, it's even maybe got some influencer content in there. They think that that's enough. But I think what's actually going to happen is you're going to have content of varying types across each of these channels to be able to compete, because there are so many products in your category that a consumer could eventually choose. And so how do you differentiate yourself? And I think content is still going to be one of those areas that they can lean into.
Makes sense. What have you heard about? So OpenAI announced they're going to charge 4% for transactions. You then start to stack that against, sorry, not against, but you then add it to the payment gateway charge. Let's call it a 2%. Now we're at 6. Then you have your marketing costs. Who knows how they're going to monetize ads? Do you think these fees are going to put anyone out of the market when it comes to actually wanting to lean into these channels? Or you think it's a new tax and you just got to deal with it?
I think it's going to be a really challenging conversation between brands and retailers, because retailers have a very, very tight margin. Let's say you've got 3 to 4% in any given product. And who's going to pay those fees? The brand doesn't want to have to pay it because, of course, they're already reducing their own margins through sell-through, and the retailer doesn't want to have to pay it because their margins are already really low. So this is going to be less about brand convenience. The retailers in this case are going to have the upper hand. I think we're going to have to work through, and there's really going to have to be an open conversation between retailers and brands on who takes pieces of that. I don't think that you're going to be able to avoid it. So then how do you get cost out so that you can maintain your margins?
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even look at it through that lens, because you're right. For a retailer, it could put them in negative margin territory depending on
Yeah,
the
and they're
product.
not going to do that. That's literally a product or a part of their assortment that they would then get much more myopic on and look at those products where they can still make margin. And so that's a risk for the brands.
Interesting. Do you have any examples of operational leverage that you've heard firsthand people are getting through AI, like customer service or something? Like, what's the most tactical thing? Because I think the whole magic employee concept, some people talk about it on LinkedIn. I haven't personally seen anyone who's doing that. Like, hey, I have 7 agents that are running my whole experience end to end. Like, I haven't personally witnessed anyone doing that. Like, what are some tactical live examples of operational leverage that people are getting?
I haven't heard of anything where I go, yeah, that you could scale that across lots of different retailers or lots of different brands. I think that brands and retailers are going to have to be really thoughtful about how they look at using AI to leverage more operational efficiency, because you can end up having more people working on AI and all of those ecosystems, and you actually just cost yourself more in the end. So I was in a conversation earlier this week, and a lot of the executives we were having this conversation on AI, and they're all racing to try to use AI to drive efficiencies, create operational leverage, as you said. And I actually don't think that it's necessarily the right moment for any brand or retailer to chase after AI. I would focus more on your foundations. Those things tend to be like, people want to outgrow their problems by getting more tools, using more AI. No, if you have a foundational problem, those things are not going to be fixed. So I would argue that, yes, listen, learn, and figure out how AI might give you operational leverage, but make sure that your foundations are in place, or you're going to do exactly what we talked about earlier. You're going to scale chaos more than you're going to scale efficiency.
That's interesting. And maybe just to make it like a mental checklist, like you need to understand where your product descriptions are now and where they need to be. From there, there's a lot of debt in my experience with data structure. And then like scaling availability is going to be really interesting because a lot of people have availability. Like what I'm failing to like understand, and maybe it's covered in the UCP, is a lot of, especially on the retail side, a lot of retailers have like regional pickup and delivery for certain items, and that's going to influence your total cost, right? So how is, if you're in an agentic search engine, how is it going to understand which inventory to call and at which point? I think I think there's likely a lot of debt there before we can really get going there. And then to your point, is all of this being done for a channel that people ultimately aren't going to use? Are they still going to go to the retail branded website and purchase it? We're seeing on our side, the amount of traffic coming through these search engines is very small. Now it's growing, but it's very, very small. And the conversion's pretty good because it actually drops the mid to end of funnel, but it's still very, very, very small. And I suspect the investments might actually be bigger than the gross sales for a lot of these brands. But yeah, it's hard to say. So far, at least that's what we're seeing. I'm curious if you have a different take.
No, I think it's the same. I have said before that I think my pet peeve is having availability but not buyability. And that translates into lower consumer confidence in your brand, whether that be your retail brand or the brand itself, or it impacts potential repeat purchase. And so how do you, to your point, dig into the right inventory node, essentially, to make sure that you've got the right inventory in the right place and not fail the customer at the end, where actually we don't have that. We don't have it in your region. We don't have it in your locale. And then you've undone everything that you were trying to do with using AI in the first place. So again, this sort of goes back to what I was saying before. Are your foundations in place, or are you just trying to scale out and you're going to have problems because you didn't do what you needed to do at the base before you attempted to use it? I think shareholders and stakeholders, they really want us to use AI. It's like the big new shiny toy, but we need to use it in a way that we can actually understand what it's doing for us, and we can attribute either some sort of KPI or conversion metric to it so that we know how to use it and continue to get more out of it, or decide not to use it there and put our efforts elsewhere.
Makes sense. And it's clearly either on the operational leverage side or as a channel. And it's unclear which one is like the which one is the winner right now. Is it
I
just an
think
operational leverage tool, or is it going to be like the biggest channel? Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I think it just depends on your business. I think if you truly have a really great D2C or e-com site, yes, use AI to do things like contextual commerce. Use it to be able to have your agents give really good recommendations. You see them playing around with that. The foundations are typically there when they're using it, particularly in mass retail, because they've done their due diligence. But I think for a lot of these smaller players or even mid-sized players, I think that it's a much harder call to make in terms of when to use it and where to use it and where you might get the most out of it.
Makes a lot of sense. As we look to wrap up, talk to me a bit about when you meet with younger folks in their career that are maybe a bit junior, they're on their first kind of e-com gig, maybe they're a manager, e-com manager, stepping into a director role. How are you helping them on their priorities for 2026? Like when they come to you, what do you think should be kind of front and center for these folks?
I mean, I think the most important thing is to understand that you can't do it alone. E-commerce is not something that you can take full control of without your cross-functional partners. Yes, you need to have ownership, you need to have accountability. The revenue needs to start and finish with one person so that there is, quote unquote, sort of a one throat to choke. However, you're not going to be able to be successful if you don't know what marketing campaigns are happening, if you don't know what merchandising is doing in store or other things that they're doing in market, right? You're not going, if you don't have a good relationship with supply chain, you're going to fail the customer over and over and over again because you can't deliver. So don't think that you can do it alone. Your cross-functional partners are as essential to your business as what you're doing down and in. And so don't forget that as you're trying to scale. I think everybody starts to deprioritize and get unfocused, and then they're not as tapped into what you're doing. Continue to pull your partners back in so that you can make the most out of your e-com business.
Very interesting. I didn't realize that was such a big challenge. Like, is this the classic, like sales, well, conversion blames marketing, marketing blames conversion, and then someone blames it's like unclear if performance isn't where you want to be. Like, it's a bit of a shared accountability. So if everyone owns it, no one owns it. You're saying that's like really, really a top challenge?
Everybody who can impact e-com needs to have some sort of e-com KPI. Or when they get distracted by other market events, they're going to deprioritize helping you out because it's not a KPI. So it's not so much a function of blame, it's more a function of distraction and their inability or lack of need to, excuse me, create that KPI success. And so you said, is it performance? Well, marketing is going to do everything that they can to drive traffic, but traffic doesn't, they're going to get the click, but they're not going to get the repeat customer. That's really the job of e-com. But if you don't know what they're doing to drive the click, how can you create a cohesive experience all the way through the funnel? Same thing with merchandising and supply chain, but just different functions. So it's not so much, I think, this he said, she said. You need to know, the left hand needs to know what the right is doing and vice versa in order to be successful, or we're going to miss things, or we're going to create inconsistent experiences for our consumer, who we should be prioritizing at the end of the day.
Makes sense. Mena, this was great. Really appreciated your time, and thanks so much for hopping on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
The e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the e-commerce toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.